I'm Nicole.
I'm Rolando.
And I'm Eddie Z.
And this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals,
an original podcast
about art originality.
And this is part 2 on our Snow White series. And today we're going to give a movie review of the new 2025 film Snow White. That's it. No other people, just Snow White. This movie was directed by Mark Webb. Do you guys know what else Mark Webb has directed?
No.
Mark Webb also did 500 Days of Summer.
Oh, I love that movie.
Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure he wrote that. And he did the Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Okay. So he has come a far way from 500 Days of Summer. But, hey, work is work. This movie was written by Aaron Cressida Wilson, who is actually known for writing a film called Secretary with Maggie Gyllenhaal. I don't know if you know about that.
You know how I feel about Maggie Gyllenhaal?
Yes, I do actually know how you feel. And it stars Rachel Zegler, Gal Gadot, and Andrew Burnap. This movie has been in discussions for a long time. I mean, it was kind of inevitable that they would get to some of the classics. And after the, quote, success of Pinocchio and Dumbo and stuff, they're like, okay, let's tackle the big one, Snow White. I think we've been talking about Snow White for a couple of years now. So it's been in the works for a while. The budget for this film was somewhere around $240 to $280 million. That's what they say. It's probably even higher. And
you think so?
I would figure maybe some things that they didn't put in there at the last minute. And as of when we're recording this is right after opening weekend for this film. It got $42 million in its opening weekend, leading to currently a total as of a Tuesday, 88 million worldwide. That was domestic. So we'll see how this film does. Yeah. I don't even know how to get into this one, guys. I mean, is there any history or any, behind the scenes that you want to give, Rolando?
In terms of behind the scenes drama that may have happened, we do know that Rachel Zegler was kind of viciously attacked by the internet when she did make comments saying that like this would be a different kind of Snow White. She has a little bit more agency. She criticized the original Snow White, which similarly were the same critiques that we had of the original film when we talked about the original Snow White, right? Yeah. I don't think Rachel Zegler crossed any lines when she said that Snow White had no agency, right?
Yeah.
But apparently the media and the internet really pounced on her for this. So that's one of the aspects of it. And it really did seem like Disney was kind of setting her up for failure a little bit too. Like they kind of were really... this was, I think, not this previous Super Bowl. I think it was last Super Bowl when like kind of they kind of were setting her up to be like, it seems like the writings were on the wall that this movie was not going to perform well, and they were kind of setting her up to be the source of the failure. Additionally, the other source of drama also came from the fact that Israel and Gaza are at war with each other, and Gal Gadot is Israeli. I've heard that she is a Zionist. I don't know that for sure, so I'm not going to speak to that, but I do know that she is Israeli, as she has her own political beliefs, as does Rachel Zegler, who does believe that Gaza should be its own independent, Palestine should be freed. Very at odds with the real queen here, right? So as a result, they were just like it seems like they just did not get along, and they were very dismissive of one another on the press tour, to the point where I think even Gal Gadot had released a statement saying, like, we're just co-workers, right? Which is just like cold as ice. Although if I were Rachel Zegler, I would want to separate myself as far from Gal Gadot after this movie as possible too.
And like you said, a lot of the controversies happened because of the quote-unquote colorblind casting. A lot of people were upset that Rachel Zegler, who, is Latina, was cast as a character whose skin is described as, white as purest snow, essentially.
Which we talked about last week. It sounded like a sick person.
Yeah, which, again, is that goals in this day and age? They said that one of the other finalists for the role of Snow White was actually another Latina actress, and that the casting call was open to everyone. Mm-hmm. So they weren't specifically looking for a Latina. It just so happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get it. Again, people who are very anti-PC culture and anti-woke culture, this is something that upsets them deeply. At the end of the day, again, I think we all here on this podcast stand with the fact that it's like it's freaking fantasy. Who cares?
Especially
And you
Disney
could cast,
movies. Yeah,
cast
like
whoever you want if they're right for the role. And it's also really nice to see different types of representation. So,
yeah.
so these are just some of the controversies that led up to it. As you said last week, Rolando, too, they had a private premiere, which is
Mhm.
usually an indication that a movie is not going to perform well, and they're trying to save their skin. So now, Snow White, in terms of the story, this is a story that, Grimm Brothers wrote. We've gotten so many different movie versions of it, not just the 19.
They just like they just wrote the collected version of it, right? They just wrote their version, but
Yes,
it's a
it was a
folk tale.
classic
So
even before
yeah, it was
them.
a folk tale that gets passed around generation to generation,
Yeah.
and Brothers Grimm just happen to be the ones that like are the first to put it in the book.
And it's been, many, many years since we've had so many different variations since Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937, probably the most ubiquitous. I think that among them are Mirror Mirror with Julia Roberts.
Never seen
That came out in 2016. I never saw it either. I think it came out in 2012, excuse me. I never saw it either, but I remember it. That television show, Once Upon a Time, also has Snow White as a character in it.
Love. Let me tell you, like this, what a way better version than this film, by the way.
I actually am sure. I would put money on that. And the Snow White and the Huntsman films. There were two of them.
Yeah, I never saw that one. That's one with not Kate
With
Blanchett.
Kristen Stewart and Charlize Theron.
Charlize Theron, yes.
So, in the 21st century alone, we've gotten Snow White properties. And I asked my students today, I had class, I asked if any of them had gone and seen this movie. Not one of them did. And I asked why, and they just said they didn't care. And it makes me wonder, is there a place in this current day society for people to actually like care about the story of Snow White, right?
I mean, I think the answer to that is yes. And the show Once Upon a Time lasted for 7 seasons. First season is basically a retelling of the Snow White story. Granted, it's like in a episodic format that's very melodramatic, but it's there, and I think it's much more compelling.
It's Snow White, but it's one story amongst many others, and they contemporize it. And this movie is doing kind of the same thing, where they're trying to contemporize these stories.
They it's 50-50, right? Half of it is contemporary, half of it is still that classic fairy tale story.
Well, regardless of that, what my point being is that they're not really just taking the classic fairy tale. They're trying to make it a little bit more modern and contemporary.
Yes.
And it's funny because that's what this movie is doing, and yet it just doesn't work. And I guess we're going to talk about a bunch of different reasons why it doesn't work. The story of Snow White.
So the story of Snow White is Snow White is born on a snowy day during the worst winter storm this kingdom has ever seen. That is why she is named Snow White. It's very much seemed like she had a Latina mother, right? Not culturally Latina, but I'm just saying visually looks like an other, and a white father. Mother dies mysteriously, and the father remarries a beautiful woman as she has magical powers. The king goes off to war, is presumed to be dead, and the queen now is the monarch of this kingdom. She makes Snow White a servant, and this queen is just obsessed with looks. When she finds out one day that she is no longer the fairest of the land, she sends her huntsman to kill Snow White. Snow White runs off, finds the 7 dwarfs, befriends them. She also then goes on to befriend a set of bandits, and with the bandits, she ends up falling in love. The evil queen comes as a old lady and gives her the poisoned apple, and Snow White falls to her endless sleep. But she is awakened by one of those bandits, the one that she fell in love with, and then they go and start a revolution, and dethrone the queen, and everyone lives happily ever after.
So if you're familiar at all with the 1937 film, you've noticed that there are some beats in his, story premise summary that are not in the original film. One, we actually get some freaking backstory about these characters, right?
Yes.
We start to, we know exactly where Snow White came from, who raised her, and then why she's in this predicament, if you will, with this evil, vain queen.
Is that what you would call this, a predicament?
Yes. And so it's kind of doing all the right things, where it's like, hey, this story was totally flawed, where we didn't have any backstory for these characters and we didn't really understand the circumstances. We were just thrown into the situation. So kind of like, let's backpedal, right? And let's provide her with this character arc. And I'm wondering, first, before I go ahead and say anything, did this movie work for you guys?
No, but for me, the reason it didn't work was not the plot and like adding some of these extra details. It didn't work for other reasons.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say I ended up appreciating giving me a little bit of backstory for both these characters, both the queen and and Snow White, definitely introducing her love interest to not just be, a guy who's just frolicking around the woods singing to random women and kissing them in coffins. So yeah, I would say elements of the story worked. Of the plot, I would agree this movie.
Yeah, I think that definitely trying to make it this movie was had an agenda, and the agenda was to kind of fix all of those things from the 1937 film. Mostly, this movie was like, we have to change any sort of insensitivities that happened in the 30s, and we have to make these characters well rounded and
Mhm.
give them more clear motivations for their actions. Um, Great. I applaud that effort. However, what we got because of that, it just almost begged the question, like, wow, I guess now that I have these backstories and now that I know the motivation of these characters, I kind of don't even think it matters because it didn't really change anything. Or it didn't, like, it ended up being so, I've seen this before, so kind of cliche and so predictable
Mhm.
that it didn't really lend itself anything new to it. It just provided a backstory, but it wasn't necessarily for me engaging
Okay.
or really trying to, I don't know, say something other than, hey, this is why Snow White is named Snow White. This is why the queen is the queen of her circumstances.
Well, I think the queen's backstory is the one that made the least amount of sense. Right? She was still driven by vanity and like her desire for gems, which I assumed would have tied back to the dwarves in some shape or form. It does not. Also, the dwarves are given a slight backstory. They have powers. That's why they're minors. We don't see that ever again later on in the movie. And
Yeah.
the the bandits are, you know, unhoused people from the kingdom who are maybe fighting in the name of the king, but like I thought they were like Robin Hood esque, but Eddie so kindly reminded me they're not giving back to the poor, they're just keeping it for themselves. So it's just like, oh,
Yes.
you're right. They're just bandits, I guess. So they're not even like like helping others. So yeah, again, A for effort, I suppose.
I suppose. Yeah. I kind of feel that way too. I was like, man, I see the potential. The execution, definitely, I don't necessarily applaud. And I did the math too that if you cut out the musical numbers that they added to the film, then this film would actually be the exact same length as the original Snow White. So it's not like they added that much more to the story.
That's wild
Isn't that
because
wild?
that is well, I mean, but so much of the original Snow White is just her cleaning. So, like,
I
like
mean, this
they
is
did
true.
change
Yeah.
they did change that up a little bit, right? Here she's teaching the dwarves how to clean up after themselves instead of cleaning for them before they even arrive. So, good messaging.
Yeah. So they changed a couple of things, and we'll get to some of the things that they changed. Now let's start with Rachel Zegler as Snow White.
Yeah, I think she did work for me, and I look. A lot of reviews have been saying that she is the best thing of the movie, and coming out of the movie, I agree with that sentiment. Like for a movie that they're trying to set up that if it flops is her fault, a lot of people on my algorithm are saying the only reason worth watching this film is because of Rachel Zegler.
You know what? After seeing the film, I would agree with that. I do think she had good chemistry with Andrew Burnap.
Who is that?
He played Jonathan.
Okay, got it.
So I do think that the two of them together, actually, I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't hate this, although their dynamic was a little too contemporary for me, where
Hmm.
it was like, I don't feel like I'm in a faraway kingdom. I feel like I'm in, present day 2025. Um, I don't think Gal Gadot worked for me. And I don't know if anybody is going to be saying Gal Gadot totally worked for me. So
Eddie, did Gal Gadot work for you?
She didn't, and I'm disappointed about that. Um, it just didn't seem. It wasn't the fit that I wanted. There were some lines that came off cringy that that you comment. Yeah, she did. it didn't work. It didn't work for me. And
I will tell you this much: Gal Gadot just did not work for me. Um, and I was going in here with an open mind because I'm just like everyone ragged on Gal Gadot for River, what is it, Death on the Nile, and I think me and Eddie were the only podcasters to
I
defend her,
loved her.
saying, "Yeah."
I
Then I was
loved
just like,
her.
"Oh, I liked her in Death on the Nile. I did not
Oh my
like.
god!
Where's all this hate coming from? I don't know. Not from me." And so I was ready to be. It's just like no, Gal Gadot could not have been as horrible as they're saying, and I'm just like, "Oh no, this she's worse than people are saying." That musical number was a fucking abomination. I feel like Gal Gadot owes me reparations for watching that.
It was pretty bad. The moment she started singing, I was like, "Oh no, oh
You know
no."
what? I kind of feel like politically she has lost the argument because of that performance, and like I think the war of Gaza should be solved. I think we know who the losers are here after that. Uh,
Yeah, it was
I
pretty bad. They
It was
they had a lot
brutal.
of wide shots in that edit too, so they were avoiding any close-ups on her, even though they ended with the classic pose at the end. So I was like, "Oof, can't
Sh-
avoid that."
it was rough. Like I'm not even. I mean, the song itself was bad, but you know what it was? It just took away from the power and the mystique of the queen.
Exactly. This queen seemed a joke,
Yes.
honestly,
Yeah.
and she's supposed to be the most menacing, scary creature out there. Let's talk a little bit about the music, by the way, while you bring it up. They added a bunch of new songs to this, and this was written by Benji Pasek and Justin Paul, who've also written The Greatest Showman and Dear Evan Hansen and other smaller musicals. They did the lyrics for La La Land. I didn't know that until I walked into the movie. The moment I heard the first song, I turned to my girlfriend. I'm like, this is The Greatest Showman, guys, right? They have that unique, like, whoa, like that. All of their songs sound like that. And they use that, like, whoa, oh, oh, a lot as a motif in this. And outside of that first song, when I was like, hey, I like this song, Good Things Grow, um,
Oh, the first song is the most memorable one, right? That's
the first song is the most memorable one.
which is that
Yeah.
one? That's the
That's Good Things Grow.
Oh wait, no.
Um,
I'm sorry. That's not the one I like. I like the one about the father daughter. The Snow White growing up.
Waiting on a Wish, which is the song she sings.
Oh, that's the song I'm thinking about. I liked Waiting on a Wish. So yeah, you're right. That's the only good song in this entire film. Outside of Whistle While You Work and Hi Ho. Right.
The
But those
only
are
two songs they kept
the
from the
only two
original.
original ones, which is
Okay.
crazy that they would not
Okay.
bring back. I understand why you don't
Yeah.
need Someday My Prince Will Come, but like you figure out how to use it.
You rewrite some of the lyrics and you keep that gorgeous melody in the
Mm-hmm.
song. Like people, I think, are expecting to at least hear that melody, and it was
Mm-hmm.
nowhere in the fucking movie. And what is so bad about the Wishing Well song that had to be removed and replacing it with Waiting on a Wish? Okay, Waiting on a Wish is fine, it's whatever. But what was wrong with Wishing
Oh, I
Well?
agree. I don't know. I don't know. Like, I guess they're trying to, because they're trying to like make Snow White here to have a little bit more agency, and like I understand why Someday My Prince Will Come and even a Wishing Well, right? It takes away her agency because it makes her this character who's very passive and just waiting for something to happen to her, and that's why I kind of like this a new song, right? Like again, it's not just about the wishing well. It's about like who you had to work to become. That's why that song kind of works in this version. And again, like I said, they're trying to give this Snow White agency. They're trying to like make her not just like a character that things happen to. Like they want her to go out and do stuff.
Yeah, and that's the big change that happens plot wise within the movie because in the original film, the climax is the apple, and then
Yes.
the dwarfs come right at the moment and they chase the wish off, and they have this huge, beautiful German expressionism chase, and then she falls off a cliff to her death.
Yeah.
Now, in this movie, she changes into a witch.
I just want to point out real quick, the dwarves chasing her, they're not even responsible for her death. It's
They're
just
not, no.
happenstance. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no, it is, which is important because we don't want to pin them as murderers in the original film, and nobody gets pinned as a murderer. Spoiler alert in this new film either. But so she gets turned to an elderly woman. She goes and she visits her, and then she just goes back to the castle, and she's pretty again. And
Yeah.
it's really anticlimactic. And then, like pretty soon after, the prince comes and kisses her and wakes her.
He's not
And
a
it kind
prince, he's a
of
bandit.
Sorry, yes. I conditioned to think like the 1937 film. The bandit Jonathan comes. And then, the film continues outside of there. And I'm like, great. Actually, Snow White can now actually have like a say in her story and a say to her ending. Cool. And yet for some reason still it didn't work for me. Like part of me was like, yes, I wanted to kind of see the classic story still, but I liked the fact that they tried, but I don't like what I got. It just, I don't know, it was all so predictable.
Well, that ending was like absolutely. For first of all, I just want to point out, my rule. You know how I don't like a movie if I walk out because I have to use the bathroom. This time I forced myself to use the bathroom. Like I got up, I tell you the exact moment I left. It was when as soon as Dopey started speaking after she wakes up from the kiss, I was just like, I'm leaving, and I went
Yeah, so out of all
get
the
myself a
dwarfs,
break.
they give Dopey this whole arc, and that they actually try and like, oh, Dopey's not a dope. Dopey just doesn't have any faith in himself, and he wasn't surrounded by the right people to, give him that faith in
I
himself.
hated it.
Cute. Are we like so like dead inside that just none of this works for us anymore?
Maybe no, because like I feel like because here's the thing. Again, here's how I know, right? The dwarf that got the story arc in Once Upon a Time was Grumpy, which is arguably the best dwarf in the original film, right? He's the one who has the actual growth and stuff, right? So that's why you focus on him. Here we decided to focus on Dopey for some reason, right? Because he's supposed to be the more innocent one, the younger one. Uh, I just don't think it worked because it's just like Dopey was already innocent and precious. So all he's learning is to speak. Grumpy is the one whose heart you had to melt to like get through and cause actual change to. Do you know what I mean?
True, yeah. I guess so you could argue that with a name like Dopey, it sounds like everybody was very condescending towards him. And they wanted to not like have him just be written off as a dopey person, that there was actually this intelligent, sensitive soul underneath.
No, I didn't need it. I didn't need it. Nor did I need that. Let me
I
let
didn't
me
need this whole movie.
Well, yeah, but the revolution at the end, right? Like uprising against the evil queen was just that was anticlimactic. That
I
was
was so
truly. I
anticlimactic.
went to pee, and when I come back, like it's just like I see the standoff, and I'm just like, I don't know how we got here, and I don't care, to be quite honest.
Yeah, so I went to pee during the musical number between Jonathan and Snow White, and when I came back, I realized I didn't even need to ask. Princess problems.
Oh, that was like their. That was like the. It reminded me of a lesser Wicked.
I sat down and I realized, wow, I didn't miss a thing. I missed them. Wow, falling in love, big surprise. So
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know. What did you think about the transformation of her into the elderly woman? And
horrible,
it was just
horrible. It was
too
like
much editing, and then the CGI was just
I
terrible.
don't mind the CGI, but it was just like, come on, like they took away what made the original one so class, like the spinning around, the camera work. I granted it's animated, but if we're going to CGI it, like, come on, give me a little bit of that beautiful animation from the original one, right?
No,
We s-
absolutely,
we saw it
yeah.
for like a second, and then we just cut to the shadows. It was absolutely idiotic. Speaking of CGI, what are your thoughts on the dwarves?
I thought like their big reveal was it was like wow hi ho in the steps, and all of a sudden there's like the big reveal, and the moment I saw them I was like this is weird because they do hire a dwarf actor in the film, and I was just like, so why couldn't the dwarfs be that way? Now I'm sure maybe they just didn't want to represent them in this, like the classic role of the seven dwarfs. But I was like, why did they have to be CGI? Like it almost
Yeah,
kind of
I did.
minimized them to the role of animals. But
Yeah, I see. I enjoyed the animal CGI.
Yeah, me
oh, they were
too.
so cute.
They
They
were
were so
great.
cute.
That that was good. I just found the dwarf thing creepy for me, and it felt like definitely uncanny valley. Like I couldn't get past the fact that this was what it is. And I couldn't like Dopey could do it for me for a little bit where I was like believing it, but none of the other characters
I think the
it
scariest
did
one
it
for
for
me
me.
was I think I think it was Bashful that was the creepiest one. Happy was also
Grumpy
kind of
was,
creepy.
Happy was creepy. Happy was straight up creepy.
Like they were
yeah.
all on some level creepy, but I feel like Happy or Sleepy were like the creepiest. Maybe Bashful also.
And then they have this random group living in the forest, and it
Yeah.
it didn't mesh well. It did not come that that whole them joining together and deciding to be like a rebellion just didn't fit. And I felt like definitely they probably edited some scenes that maybe would have made this transition a little bit better, but it was like everyone was coming to conclusions and already building relationships without you seeing it. You feel like but nothing happened. Like, why are they? How are they here? Nothing
Yeah,
happened.
yeah.
It's true.
Another big scene that was a big letdown when compared to the original one was when Snow White runs off into the woods, into the Black Forest, right? Because it's a German
Mm-hmm.
tale, and it's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be Black Forest. The animation of that is absolutely stupendous, right? That's where we get that German expressionism. That's where we get those like gorgeous transitions to seeing like what she sees in her head, and then also like what's the reality, and vice versa, right? And we had that for like 2 seconds. It was a CGI jumbled mess. It was horrible. Actually, you know what? The huntsman also kind of sucked in this fucking movie because like that whole scene where like he's threatening her was like the least threatening thing I've ever seen in my life. Like this is probably the only scene in the movie where Rachel Zegler did not shine, and where she has a knife like up at her neck, and she's giving nothing. She's giving nothing, and I don't know if she's just like at this point just like this movie I'm done. Like, you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
and I think at some point they must have given up on the movie too, because what about the whole father thing? Because it kind of felt like at some point they were trying to like set it up that he was alive, and then it
Right.
was like, oh, I'm gonna go out and find my father, and then it was like, oh no, he's dead.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just like, why was this
I
there?
got the sense that everybody else knew that he was dead except her, but nobody wanted to break the
But
news
she
to
only
her.
believed this for like a couple of days. Man, she didn't have this hope throughout the entirety of the movie. As far as she knew, he was dead.
I feel like there's these things that are
Mm,
missing. Like, how did we get
yeah.
Yeah,
here? Like, how are we feeling this
Hmm.
way about something where there was no beginning to
Yeah.
this, you
Yeah.
know?
I will say the one thing I did like about the movie, which Nicole, you had asked me, how do I feel about Snow White's hair? And I last week, and I was just like, I'm going to reserve my judgment until I speak about this one. I hated her hair so much in the trailers, but at least they gave you a reason to why it is so bad. All right, like I was going, you know what? I will swallow this pill. I will swallow this anger that I have because they gave you a reason why it's hideous. You know what they did not give me a reason for why she's what's so hideous?
that dress.
Her outfits. All these
Yeah,
outfits were
exactly. Thank you.
absolutely the only good ones were the queen. The queen actually, I thought she wore fabulous outfits. I thought she looked great, and that's sure Gal Gadot looks great, but like I actually like the shimmer. I love the opulent jewels that they were giving her. I love the crown. Like those worked. But Snow White's outfit was absolutely tragic. It looked like a straight up costume.
It did, and it's like, oh, so you're gonna go out and kill her? Why are you giving her this outfit now?
Why
Like,
are
it
we
really made
murdering
any
her?
sense. Yeah, it just. It's funny that the movie was like, we have to give you a reason as to why her hair looks this hideous, because I guess they knew it too. Um, did
I'm
you?
okay with that. Like, it made
Yeah,
sense.
I was okay making it a connection to servitude, and then it being uh she elevates it by her mannerism, by who she is, what she stands for, and who she truly is, the princess, right? So she elevates it. But yeah, I am not a fan of when it looks like a costume when it doesn't have to. Like, we can play with color and material to get kind of the same idea of the dress without making it look like you got this from Disney's
Like Disney store.
well, it's Disney store, you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
know?
Like even the costumes that you would see in Disney World look better than this.
It's true.
You know what I mean? That's what's like killing me. And part of the reason that these costumes all looked so terrible was because they're never weathered. Like, and this is part of the like 200. How much? $230 million.
Yep.
They couldn't spend it on actual costumes and seamstresses who can actually weather texture. Now that takes time, that takes money, right? But if we already have this budget, let's spend it on some things that matter here.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I could have used at least 3 more adorable deer in that movie, so I would have wanted another
Oh, you
VFX
like the?
artist
I
for
think the
that.
deer
But
were the creepiest ones. The rabbits, all the other like little
They were
folklore
no,
creatures.
the deer
creepy.
were
They're not
adorable.
creepy.
So
The moment it came out
See,
of the shadows.
I don't see. I don't mind the deers almost playing in the realm of
Bambi, because they're
no, no,
making
no.
Bambi
Of
too, right?
They are making
hold on,
Bambi.
hold on. Of between being
Mm-hmm.
realistic to
Mm-hmm.
animation. Like, they look like they're coming out of the
Mm-hmm.
picture book. But I think when it's human, I think that's when it's like,
Yeah.
don't. I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I think that's why the animals worked, and I think Disney has solved how to make animals work because the original version of the Lion King, the CGI, we went too realistic, and it just kind of made them boring.
Yeah.
Here, these animals were expressive, and I love that. They look so cute. That was the only, outside of Rachel Zegler, the only other shining thing in this film were the animals. And
No,
stuff.
absolutely.
And I kind of wish we had more of them.
What do we think about the way that they killed the queen?
Idiotic. It made no sense to me.
Oh my god, so stupid.
Like, so she shattered the mirror. So at no point did they establish that the mirror and her life essence were tied together.
I know. Or that the mirror had this ability to do that. Is that why she had powers? I don't know. It just gave me so many more questions, and it just. But of course, Snow White cannot be a murderer, right? So they had to come up with some way that she would be cleared.
Yeah.
Of that. So
yeah,
it was a big miss, as we all kind of anticipated that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of walked out of it just being like, when are they going to stop with these freaking movies? And they're not. So
yeah. What did you think about?
To look forward to?
Yeah, I have a question for you and
Yeah.
Eddie. Right? I kept saying this was like a colorblind cast, and it kind of was. Like, like race didn't seem to matter in this world, and that's fine. That's beautiful. But why are the dwarves all white? Why couldn't we get one black dwarf? And why couldn't, instead of whistle while you work, it could have been Little John or one of the Yin Yang twins, and it would have been whistle while you twerk, right? And then we would have gotten like a nice modern version of this song, and everyone would have loved that, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, we don't know when this takes place. This could just be an alternate universe. They could twerk at any point.
Absolutely.
In any kingdom.
Rachel Zegler would have been down. She would have been down. No, but in reality, like, why did all the dwarves have to be white presenting?
Yeah, no,
they're
that's a great question.
They're fantastical creatures.
And I love how none of the outrages about this movie is towards them, or like the fact that they all got CGI'd and they took away like
jobs,
actual roles from actors.
Yeah, especially when, like you mentioned, there is a little person in this film, right? So
yeah,
we know they exist. So why can't we just hire, you know what? They don't even need to be too qualified as a little person. We could hire short men. Like, that's fine. And then, like, use camera trickery to make them seem even smaller. How do these dwarves procreate? At this point, we should have broken some barriers and given us, like, some female dwarves.
I would have loved at least one dyke dwarf. So
that would have been great.
That would have been great. Yeah,
that would have been awesome.
Missed opportunities. They just turned in something that was so bland and so regurgitated from 100 different movies that you've seen before, and very pointless, unfortunately. So yeah, this was one of the worst ones. Pretty soon we're going to release a video where we rank all the Disney live action remakes, and boy, will this be at the bottom. But this is only, like we said, this is only part 2 of a 4-part series. So please stay tuned for our next part, because we're going to do a compare and contrast between the 1937 and the 2025, and we might just have a special guest for that one. So please stick around for that, to be released in a couple of days. If you like this movie, or if you like this episode, please like, comment, share your thoughts with us. And until next time,
stay unoriginal.